with young kids before and you have a little bit of trepidation about working with kids, that's totally fine. Just like anything else, working with young kids is a skill that can be learned. And, you know, for me, it was way outside of my comfort zone to hang out with young kids. My first real experience with being around a lot of little kids was actually my boyfriend's family. He had a lot of young cousins, and it was super intimidating because he was someone who could be really like goofy and fun and playful, and he'd get down on the floor with them and run around, and I was more reserved. It was a little hard for me to kind of like let my guard down, and I was afraid of looking silly, and so I would just kind of freeze. And the first time that I really decided to take that risk, there was something very freeing about it. And as a teacher, you don't have to be a kid, because the way that you're going to be interacting with these students is really more on an adult to adult plane. But you do have to be willing to get in their world. You have to be willing to let your imagination go, and you have to be willing to just be with them. The way that a child's mind works is not the way that an adult's mind works. They're kind of following their flight of fancy, and if you're able to follow their flight of fancy, don't worry that you're going to lose track of kind of your adult priorities, like fixing their posture or structuring the lesson. It's actually, you'll figure out how to find that balance between following that imaginative path with them and at the same time bringing it back around to whatever teaching point it is that you need to deliver. One of the mistakes that adults make when they're not comfortable interacting with young children is that they'll be really artificial, really smiley, or kind of like baby talk with them. And that's not cool, because the kids can really detect pretty easily when someone's being fake with them. But the other end of the extreme is not good either, because you don't want to talk down to them, but you also can't talk to a young child the way that you would talk to an adult, because they've only been speaking English for 3 or 4 years. They don't have the same vocabulary, they don't have the same life experiences, they don't have the same level of sophistication than an adult would have. So you do need to change registers to talk to a young child, and you want to be real with them. So relate to them as you would with a person, and try to find language that's really on their level. And that includes when you're explaining concepts that are violin related. For example, if I want to tell them that they're rushing their quarter notes, I'm not going to say that they're rushing their quarter notes. I'm going to say, these notes, you're playing them too fast. Can you play them slower? And is that accurate terminology from a musical point of view? No. Is that going to get the result that I want? Yeah, because they actually can hear the rhythm. They can hear those rhythmic relationships. They can hear those fractions. I don't need to use the fraction words that they're going to get in 5th grade to communicate that concept in a way that they're going to be able to respond to and make the correction that I'm looking for. So that doesn't mean that I'm not going to introduce the appropriate terminology. It just means that I'm going to initially give them the language that they can most easily relate to. And then later on, after they've gotten that experience, after they've started mastering that skill, then I'm going to give them that correct terminology. By the way, this kind of note is called a quarter note. But when I'm explaining something, I want to really reduce that cognitive load for them as much as I can, give it to them in the simplest language that I'm able to, that they can connect to. I want to talk a little bit about the nature of young children. Just a few different topics that can kind of help the teacher get into the world of teaching the young child and really find ways of relating that support that young child and meet them where they are. So young children, first of all, don't necessarily have strategies available for them. This is one of the reasons that we really depend upon the practice parent to be guiding that process at home, to be, monitoring their progress and helping to break things into pieces, helping to scaffold the activities at the appropriate level. However, one thing that children really are capable of is being very, very detail-oriented. But as the adult, we have to somehow find a way to communicate the type of detail that we want them to attune themselves to in a way that makes sense in their world. So for example, some of the skills that I want them to work on are not hitting other strings. Now, in the beginning, they're just thrilled to be making whatever sound they're making on the violin. They don't have a concept of like, this is what I'm supposed to sound like, and then comparing that to how they actually sound. They're just delighted to be making noise on this instrument that they wanted to play. A young child, you know, loves nothing better than to sit in the middle of the floor with a bunch of pots and pans and bang on them. So that's where they're at developmentally with noise. So expecting them to have a concept of what is a beautiful tone on the violin is really definitely something that we're going to have to train them to attune to. So I'm going to make that concrete for them. They're going to have to learn how to discriminate when they have accidentally bumped into another string and what that sounds like. They may or may not actually notice that on their own. So I'll call that spaghetti strings. You know, don't bump into other strings. I have a little symbol that I'll draw on their assignment page that symbolizes spaghetti strings, and having that little symbol is actually part of the way that I make it concrete for them. If I want them to make a more beautiful, warm sound, I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to demonstrate for them the sound that I don't want, which is that scratching sound. I might make a number of different scratching sounds, and we'll talk about what this scratchy sound sounds like and what this other scratchy sound, like maybe playing on the fingerboard, you know, what do you think it sounds like? And really have them listening to the characteristics of those sounds before I tell them, here's the sound that we're going for. And, you know, then I'll create another little symbol for no cat scratches. So that child is very capable of being very perfectionistic in their practice and attuning to whatever detail you want them to attune to, and they can get really excited about that. We just have to find a way to language that in a way that they get it. As we're teaching a young child, they are still very early in their development. They're still trying to locate different parts of their body. They're used to whole hand grasping activities, maybe an index to thumb movement. They haven't learned to differentiate their fingers. They know that they have 4 fingers, but finding them individually is still going to be building new neural pathways for them. Another developmental challenge that a young child is going to be right in the middle, actually right in the beginning of, is crossing the midline of the body. And that's something that is going to develop gradually over the ages from about 4 to 8 years old. It's something that if a young child is reaching for an object, they're going to tend to move their whole body so that they don't have to cross the midline of their body versus crossing over this way, which requires a left-right brain coordination that they haven't developed yet. So one of the things that we can do in those very first early lesson experiences is remove some of those barriers, simplify the process, remove some of the midline challenges. Starting piano is one of the accommodations that we've made because it's right in front of them. They don't have to cross the midline on the piano. They also don't have to differentiate their fingers on the piano in that first violin lesson. They can just use the index to play hot cross buns. It's fine. I'll teach them, you know, in that second lesson, we'll have them do a little exercise where they're tapping individual fingers on a tabletop and practicing finding those fingers. And then if they can find them on the tabletop, then they can start to be able to push down those piano keys. But working with those individual fingers on the piano is going to be a challenge for them. So if we can approach that in building blocks, that's going to help them a lot. The same thing with the violin. Violin is essentially a crossing the midline activity. So if we can delay that step, it's going to give them a period of time where they can really get comfortable with some of the basic concepts of, you know, the notes go up one by one, my fingers go on the same string, they go on these tapes. And then we can delay that midline experience until they've already gotten a few of the other nuts and bolts into place. So with a very young child, I'm going to have them sitting cross-legged on the floor. We're going to plunk that violin down into their lap, and they can just place their fingers on the fingerboard here. Now it's upside down, so there will still be that challenge, but they can see their fingers. And they need to be able to see their fingers because a young child If they put their hand behind their back and you say, I want you to tap your pinky for me, they can't find which one is their pinky. They actually do have to literally be able to see that finger to know which one is moving and to kind of will that intention down into their hand. And you know, at this stage they might get frustrated if they can't manage to locate the finger that they want to move. I had a child in her first lesson do the tabletop exercise, and when she discovered that she couldn't do it, her eyes just filled with tears. And you know, something that I can tell them to give them a little bit of patience in the process is, your brain is learning how to talk to your fingers, and we just have to be patient. Another aspect of young children that it's important for teachers to understand is that children communicate not through words, they communicate through behavior. So you could say, you could even tattoo on the inside of your arm, children's behavior is not good or bad. Children's behavior is just a communication. Now, the problem is that it's not a clear communication, so it's really up to us, the teacher or the parent, to figure out what is being communicated. A really useful way to think about it comes from Adlerian psychology, which is that children are motivated, sort of the deepest motivation of children is to achieve belonging or significance. So all of their behavior is oriented toward trying to achieve these two desirable states, or to communicate that something has broken down in their effort to have that experience of belonging or have that experience of significance. So as we seek to interpret a child's behavior, the behavior is ambiguous, and it's our job to figure out where that breakdown is occurring. So I have to know the child in front of me enough that when Sarah is suddenly totally fascinated by that picture frame or wants to ask me about every other object of the room, that I know that it's because she's scared of starting this new piece that I want her to start, and that she's worried that she won't be able to do it, or that I've asked her to play something that she practiced and she thinks that she's going to mess it up, or whatever. Now, sometimes it might be something that's directly in the lesson situation, like some kind of anxiety. Sometimes it might be that I just said something that hurts their feelings. Sometimes it might be something happened in the car on the way to lesson, or they had, you know, a friendship in the morning, something happened in their school day. Maybe they're just tired. But it's really up for us in collaboration with their parents to figure out, like, you know, what is this communication actually? And then as a teacher, as a parent, we don't want to be managing that behavior, because the behavior is not really where the power is. What we want to be managing is the dialogue, is that child's internal dialogue, is that child's internal state. That's what we want to respond to, because the behavior is really only the surface expression of whatever dynamic or discomfort is going on inside of the child. So that's one of the reasons that a behavior modification system doesn't necessarily work, although it can work, but it can also fail to get at the real source of the problem, which might be there's just an underlying need that we need to discern and then actually help put into words and address with the child. Another characteristic of young children is that they are still in the process of forming their value system, and they are looking to the adults in their world, whether that's mom and dad, whether it's their teacher in pre-K or us, to find out what those values are that are regarded in the adult world. And so they don't necessarily have a concept of striving for excellence at this point. They don't necessarily have a concept that we work hard and that hard work is something that they should be proud of. That is something that we as teachers are going to be verbally talking about, as well as demonstrating through our own role modeling. So in my lessons with them, I'm going to talk to them about, you know, the importance of doing things well and the importance of doing complete work, of the difference between working hard and not working hard. And you know, that child is a big person. They can hear a really direct, honest communication, and they know when it's delivered from a place of genuine caring and love, and they'll take that genuine feedback and they can run with it. And what they want to do is to please us, and they want to internalize the values that we care about. So if we can be direct in sharing those, that's a real service that we can give to them. you.